Hey everyone, welcome back to Extra Credit, and today is our very first episode in a brand new series on the Middle Ages. So the Middle Ages usually get a pretty bad rap as this sort of terrible time to be alive, but that's not really fair. I mean, yeah, there was war and poverty and famine and disease and superstition and the Black Death and child mortality and the children's... I think we're going to need to rethink this intro. So the Middle Ages kind of have gotten a bad rap historically, but as we're going to see in this series, it really is more complex than that. But whether good or bad, they deserve at least to be understood on their own terms. So first of all, what actually were the Middle Ages? Well, to start with, we should look at a timeline of European history, and that'll help us get our heads around it already. As you can see here, European history is often broadly divided into three major chunks. Traditionally, it starts with the classical era of Greece and Rome, and the word classical just means the best, because traditional historians viewed Greece and Rome as pretty much the best time in Western history or maybe even in world history. Then, in the Renaissance, which is usually seen as the start of the so-called modern era, people looked back to Greece and Rome and thought it was awesome and tried to recreate it in their own day and age by bringing back all kinds of Greek and Roman ideas. Kind of like when Netflix brings back your favorite old TV show, except the Renaissance was actually good. But between the classical period and the Renaissance was apparently this long 1,000-year stretch where nothing much important happened, and so these Renaissance scholars just said it was a Middle Age, and really not worth very much at all. So that's the first thing to know about the Middle Ages, is that the phrase itself doesn't actually tell us anything about the time period, it just tells us about what it supposedly wasn't like. It apparently wasn't as awesome as Greece, Rome, or the Renaissance. But what actually was going on during this time? Because there actually was some pretty big stuff going down, it turns out. Well, to answer that, we have to go back to the fall of the Roman Empire, because if there's any place where the Middle Ages could be said to begin, it's where Rome came to an end. The backstory here is that for hundreds of years, the Roman Empire had dominated Europe and had provided a single political framework to hold Europe together. But in 476 AD, when the Roman Empire fell apart, Europe was now kind of like a shattered glass plate. It fragmented into literally hundreds of kingdoms, principalities, territories, with nothing to hold it together anymore, except, crucially, the one unifying feature of the Catholic Church. Remember that when Rome fell, the Catholic Church survived and ends up tying Europe together for the next 1,000 years or so, which is why a better name for the Middle Ages, one that actually might tell us something about what happened in the Middle Ages, would be the Age of Faith, because the Christian faith in particular is what glued Europe together. On that note, the Middle Ages also saw the rise of the Islamic religion in Asia, and the interactions between the forces of Islam and Christianity would go on to shape world history in some pretty massive ways, and I mean like more than just that awkward time called the Crusades. So to zoom in a little bit more here, one of the major events in the very earliest days of the Middle Ages in Europe was the baptism of a guy named Clovis in the year 508 AD. Clovis was the king of a Western European so-called barbarian tribe, i.e. a non-Roman tribe, named the Franks, and unfortunately was probably also a full-sized human being, unlike this very cute picture. Though on the other hand, he was apparently descended from a merman, because why not? But the big deal about Clovis is that when he was baptized as a Christian, he was baptized as a Catholic Christian. And the reason why that matters is because the Catholic faith would then go on to be the dominant factor in European history, unlike some of the other sub-strands of Christianity which were actually around at that time and which weren't fully orthodox, meaning they didn't fully believe in some of the key doctrines that the Bible teaches. As king of the Franks, Clovis ruled over a fairly large territory, and the dynasty of kings that came from him would be called the Merovingians. Now, the Merovingian rulers were famous for basically two things. One, their long, beautiful hair, and two, for being pretty much useless as kings. In fact, they were nicknamed the Do-Nothings because, it's pretty obvious. So after a couple hundred years of Merovingian rule, the dynasty was finally removed and a new one took its place, led by Charles Martel, aka Charles the Hammer, and no, he only sounds like a pro wrestler. Charles Martel had a grandson named Charlemagne, and Charlemagne, or Charles the Great to be precise, would go on to have one of the greatest empires in medieval history. He brought together a massive territory that covered lots of modern-day Germany, France, and even down into Italy. And in the year 800 AD on Christmas Day, the Pope in Rome actually crowned Charlemagne as Holy Roman Emperor. And if you're thinking, hey, didn't the Roman Empire thing, I thought that was like a few centuries ago. Well, you're right, the Roman Empire was dead and gone like 3 centuries ago. But again, it's kind of the Netflix syndrome. Charlemagne wants to bring it back better than ever. Except he brings it back and it's just not quite as good as the original. But it's still a big deal because, as we said, these territories would eventually give rise to the modern nations of France and Germany, and this shows us one of the key ideas of the Middle Ages, which is the formation of the countries that we see on a map of Europe today. It was during this time that kingdoms like England, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Rohan, Gondor. Okay, technically not those last two. These were the nations that came into existence at this time and whose interactions would shape the course of European and North American and South American and even world history for centuries to come, even up to the present moment today. Of course, the role of the Christian church in that history would also be crucial, which is why we're going to look at different aspects of Christianity during the Middle Ages and see what faith looked like at that time. Now, along the way in this series, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, and I don't have it all fully planned out yet, but what I really want us to keep in mind is this wonderful quote by historian Tony Jute, who said that the past was neither as bad nor as good as we suppose. It was just different. Like really different. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching Extra Credit today. Hopefully you enjoyed our first episode on the Middle Ages, and as I said before, we'll see where the series goes from here. I really don't have much of a concrete plan at this point, but come along for the ride and I'm sure we'll learn a fun thing or two. Your pop quiz for this week is, in what year was Clovis baptized? As always, work hard, read books, play outside, and we'll see you next time.